Well, Mr. Maggin, thank you so much for being back with us again today. Did you know what you wanted to be when you first got to Lafayette, or did Lafayette kind of shape your vision for the future?
I wanted to be a graduate. That was my objective, was to be a graduate. It was over the 4 years that I determined what I wanted to be. And as I have said in the past, the professors that I had basically shaped my vision of the future, and it paid off.
Great. Did you ever have a challenging experience in your career that taught you a lesson or shaped you as a person?
Not
Or
that,
many
not
challenging
that I want to talk
experiences?
about. Not really. There was no cathartic event, nothing that was that significant that really changed me. The biggest change here, when I was here, I took a constitutional law class with a Professor Alphonse, and it was the kind of course that was so rigorous that it made me work hard. You had to stand up and present cases. It was quite unique, even then, and it changed the way that I behaved in class, and it really changed
Yeah.
my outlook on school.
Can you tell us two or three important skills that you think graduates need in order to be successful in today's working world?
Most important thing is being able to communicate, both in writing and verbally. That's one of the things that Lafayette does very well. Uh, Other than that, hard work, diligence, foresight, all the the requisite skills to really succeed in these days.
And as a student and an alumnus, what is it do you think that makes Lafayette special?
Well, I always have said that the one thing that I appreciated the most was the kid sitting next door to me. I think uh, the opportunity to meet a wide variety of students with different backgrounds is a huge plus. Other than that, every professor here takes a special interest in our students, and that makes the difference as well.
I completely agree. And lastly, can you give us a sense of where the media and communications industry is headed?
Well, it seems to me that it's going to uh, all the media seems to be going into one pipe and into several devices, a multitude of devices. So we're eventually going to, it seems to me, have the ability to access video everywhere on a variety of devices, and that video will be, all sorts of kinds of content, whether it's entertainment, news, sports, or whatever.
Great. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me back there? Okay, good. Um, well, first of all, I want you to know that I walk the walk. Shirt is Van Heusen. That jacket is Van Heusen. This tie, even my socks, but I'm not going to go any further than that. um, yeah, what I'd like to do is give you a flavor for how the world has progressed, at least in my career, and how corporate social responsibility has become a much larger factor for all industries. I mean, when I look at the description of this course, I see that it probes the intersection of business and politics by stressing the myriad ways that policies affect business decisions and market outcomes. Well, there's a panoply of opportunities there, and there are no right answers. You yourselves are going to have to make a decision as to where your philosophies fall in this when business and public policy meet. And that's something that you're going to have to make some sort of judgment on yourself. But let's get back to the beginning of this, which is effectively right after the Second World War. There was this consistent fear of and memory of the Depression. And most people were so afraid that all they focused on were the economics of business. How do you make money? How do you keep the economy churning? Nobody really thought very much about the labor implications or the environmental implications of what they were doing. Everybody was geared to making sure that the economy during the 1950s and early 60s was churning out jobs and opportunities for people. And it worked. And over the course of time, prosperity had a way of influencing corporate behavior. And with prosperity, people could at least relax, and there came about a countervailing thought that maybe some of the policies that corporations were using to generate profits, maybe they were a little bit overreaching and having some sort of negative effect on the world generally and on certain segments of the population. This expanded as businesses became more globalized. There was much less influence of domestic policy as things occurred overseas. As jobs were being moved, some of the negative aspects of employment and the environment started coming back, and there was a lot written about taking advantage of opportunities overseas that had negative consequences on the environment or on people generally. That then started people to think whether or not we should have some sort of policy implications that would restrict the way corporations behaved. And now, that's where I come in, because frankly, I never thought of these issues. For years and years, all I was interested in was how do I make more money for our corporations. As Dr. Crane mentions, Van Heusen, I joined that board a long time ago. At that time, 85% of all products were made in America. Today, virtually nothing is made in America. This transition from a domestic-oriented production to an international production created all sorts of issues. We opened a plant, actually we had a plant in Guatemala. In Guatemala, our plant was paying very good wages relative to the community. We had medical facilities there for our employees, but a lot of people criticized the fact that we were theoretically exploiting the Guatemalan labor force. I was sent as part of a group to research our behavior in Guatemala. And what I found, frankly, was I thought we did a very good job. Certainly the working conditions were not like they were for our employees here in the States. But we also were exposed to other factories run by other people. And the conditions were so incredibly deplorable, it is hard to describe. You're talking about people packed in next to each other, doing piecework with lack of lighting, very hot. There were supervisors who were basically taskmasters. It was deplorable. We did not use those factories, but other major branded apparel companies, in that case, did. And we came back, and the first thing we did was make sure that we upgraded our facilities. Fortunately, the profit margins that we were able to generate because of the use of Guatemalan labor were substantial and enough to allow us to do certain upgrades of our facilities. But we decided to establish a group within Van Heusen that would go to every single plant, every plant from our suppliers, and do an entire analysis and make sure that the workplace there was up to our standards. And we eliminated a whole raft of suppliers around the world. We, as a result, became a leading voice for how supplier workplaces should behave. And we were followed by several other manufacturers. Nike, for instance, is one now with us. Right after I got back from Guatemala, and about a year later, after we had upgraded our relationships, there was a situation that some of you might know of, maybe not, but Kathy Lee Gifford. You know who Kathy Lee Gifford is? She's now the host of Today, I think. She had a clothing line, and her clothing line was produced in the Far East in factories that had child labor, deployed child labor, and there was no thorough analysis of the workplace conditions and all that, and it became a big expose, and there is no longer a Kathy Lee Gifford clothing line as a result. That effect on the reputation has really created an incredible concern on the part of manufacturers generally, and so as a result, a lot of companies have gotten involved in this whole area of what we call corporate social responsibility. When I started in business, corporate social responsibility was basically the softball team or a charity event or something. There was no concern whatsoever about what the greater implications are. The way we define corporate social responsibility, the areas that we are focused on at Phillips Van Heusen, we look at the workplace and make sure that our employees have the right benefits, are paid a fair wage, that the working conditions are good, that we're meeting our diversity requirements and things like that. We have a thorough, rigorous approach and a very strong feedback system that ensures that our workplace is something that we can be proud of. We also look at the community in which we operate. And when we encourage our employees to become active with the community, creating all sorts of charitable opportunities and becoming integral citizens in those communities in which we work. Again, we have a very positive encouragement system and a very strong feedback system. We also look at the environment. The environment, we want to make sure that sustainable production is at the top of our list. We are heavy into recycling, energy. We look at all of our energy needs. The environment is a particular stress for us. Mattel, you probably remember the lead paint in toys that Mattel had a problem with. That is the kind of thing that we're trying to avoid, is that where we are proactive in front of those kinds of situations and make sure that our products are produced in accordance with environmental safety requirements. So that's the third area. And the fourth area is the whole notion of human rights. Last year we had, I brought with me a woman who runs our human rights area, and she is maybe the leading expert in the country in terms of how corporations address human rights issues. And our program is a model for virtually every company. As I mentioned, we go proactively to every one of our suppliers. We're there auditing their workplaces, ensuring that there's no child labor, that there's fair wages and all that important things. So that's where our program is. It's a very broad, aggressive program. The program does not work without corporate involvement, without a tone at the top pushing this program. And the board has created a committee on which I sit, and there are three of us, who monitor the practices and the policies of the company in relationship to all these four areas. And then we publish and we oversee the publication of a report that addresses what we're doing in these areas. We started this about 3 years ago. We were not really considered a model company at that point, but last year we finally made the list of top 100 corporately responsible companies. This year we were number 26 on that list, and our intention is to move up into the top 10 anyway. And we continue with an aggressive program supported by our management, supported by the board, and it's achieved its result to date. So that's the Van Heusen story. And the question really is, for the rest of industry, is this area of concern, I would say, about the economic consequences of corporate social responsibility. What does it cost to run this program? Of course, the alternative is it costs you your entire reputation if it goes wrong. But what is the ultimate cost to the company of having this program, and is it worth it? On the one side, people argue that this is not really a legitimate function of companies, that their primary goal should be to make money, a return on investment, and work on behalf of their investors. That's matched on the other side by others who say that the government should be much more proactive in terms of how they regulate and create laws to force companies to become more involved in corporate behavior. And I guess the question is, and I'd like to know amongst this group what your feelings are. How many people here feel that that corporate social responsibility, involvement in the kinds of things that we're talking about, is not a legitimate function of a corporation?
I think partially it is the corporation's social responsibility. But in addition to the government and the corporations, there is also another component, which is civility, which is citizens. If they engage as a group that can enact a force on the corporations. Like in our school, we have the club called Stand for Amnesty. If you see the poster put there, like a tour to Sedaxo, the truth of Sedaxo, which is the food provider of our school service. I know this club leader personally, and he's a very good friend of mine. So from this case, we can see that students engaging in this sort of activities, and I see a hope in this. So I think there may be a solution out of this.
Mm-hmm. Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. Referencing Sodexo.
Yes. They're standing for the employees' rights.
Yes.
So they're saying that Sodexo is abusing their employees.
Yeah.
So that's why they want to
Now, Sodexo has reported that their employees are happy and that they pay a fair wage and the working conditions are good. And I know there are other people who feel that Sodexo has taken advantage of certain people, right? Mm-hmm. And so from your perspective, what is your view? What would your view be of Sodexo? And how much work have you done to analyze that circumstance?
Just as a normal student, I think my case would apply to a lot of people. Like I got occupied by my coursework. So I know a lot of people, even they care for the situation, they won't have the time to go for such a thing. And that happens in real world as well. People get occupied by other things and no one pays attention to things like this. So it is indeed an issue. But I also realize it's very important to educate the campus on these sort of things. And that's why I think it's very important to support activities like this. To first get informed and then do something.
And the pressure that students and others create on corporate behavior is important. And it's the kind of thing that we want to be proactive on and get ahead of so that kind of situation doesn't occur. The world is not perfect, but to the extent that there's perfect information, presumably there's a feedback mechanism. The college would not employ somebody that they felt was not doing right by their employees. And I presume that's the important element, is the kind of feedback system that the college would get or consumers would get in the consumer world, right? Anybody else feel that corporations should not be proactive in terms of addressing some of the corporate social responsibility issues? How many people feel that the government should take a more active role in providing a path or an agenda for corporations? And what would you...
I would actually say sort of against the government getting involved with social responsibilities for corporations, because I feel like the main objective of the corporation is to make a profit. They're not to, I mean, it's great if they're able to influence their society, which they live in, but I feel like it's more the people in the corporation that need to make a difference, not the corporation itself. So it should be like a responsibility of the corporation. That's just another thing that, like another thing the corporation is worried about.
So, okay, so you think that the government should play less of a role, and the corporation should temper where they spend their resources?
Yeah.
Any,
I was thinking that there should be some sort of a standard that, I mean, obviously, like child labor and things like that, like, you can't do that. But, I mean, having the government play, I guess, a larger role in inspecting things like that, ensuring that circumstances like that aren't occurring.
mm-hmm. So you would want the government to be a little bit more proactive in terms of setting, and in fact, obviously, there are laws and regulations.
Like you were saying, I mean, I don't think they should take it too far, like where, like, they can't violate, I guess, like a company is supposed to make money, that's what their goal is, so, like, don't take it too far on the government's part, but there should be some sort of regulations that the government should take a larger part in.
Okay.
I was going to say basically the same thing, that it is important for corporations to make money. So I think either you need to create an incentive for them to be fiscally responsible, or you need to make them do it.
Okay, let's use an example, a real life example. The government has dictated or passed a law that will eliminate the incandescent light bulb. These light bulbs. They're going to, after I think it's 2014, you won't be able to buy an incandescent light bulb, you know, the Thomas Edison creation. Instead, they're promoting, you're going to have to buy these CFLs, you know, the fluorescent lights. Now, fluorescent lights are supposed to be much more economical. They're going to save energy. For the consumer, they're going to last longer, use less energy, and presumably be less expensive over time. But the government has not provided any alternative to those light bulbs. The marketplace presumably could have made that judgment on its own. You as a consumer could decide, well, I don't want to save money in the long run, so I'm going to buy the fluorescents. I don't want the incandescents, even though I may not like the light of the fluorescents. You know, I'm economically motivated, therefore I'm going to buy these fluorescents. On the other hand, the alternative is that the government has dictated that you have no alternative. There is no alternative. Now, what's the general feeling amongst you about the government dictating something as opposed to letting the market provide for that decision?
It's a great example. This is a really good example.
save money over a long period of time, then it'll, on its own, people will decide to buy.
So you think you're smart enough to make that decision?
I don't think I am, but people.
I think you are. As long as you have that L on your head, you're smart enough. I don't know about the S, but the L, yes.
I think like rather than the government forcibly regulating, like say for example pollution, if the government was just something like you can't pollute, it wouldn't work. But using that like trade tasking process and like giving them an incentive and kind of creating like an alternative marketplace, like they're still regulating, but they're kind of regulating in an economical manner. So regulation can still be necessary, but they can just go about it a different way than like forcibly regulating it.
Yeah, is that, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Actually, I kind of agree with Helen's point because I just wanted to add something to that. Like I think also the government could do something economically, like through tax and subsidies, to provide this kind of incentives rather than just through regulations, like laws and things like that. And this will work economically as well.
Now, the government is influenced by politics, right? I mean, there are people, there are countervailing forces, but at the end of the day, the government is subject to the whims of a wide variety of influences, but primarily it's a political body. So it's going to follow a political agenda. And the influencers are largely people with resources to make that, to influence their decision. Now, in the case of this light bulb, for instance, I mean, they're not giving us, they're telling us we have no choice. We're not going to allow you even to have an incandescent light bulb available to you. The politics of that is whatever. At the end of the day, though, the politics may not be in the best interests of the country. These fluorescent lights have an incredible environmental impact. They contain mercury. There's been no consideration for the cost, the ultimate cost to consumers and to the country generally of disposing of this mercury. So you have a near-term decision that's going to impact all of us that is based on a desire to create a much more economic environment, lower cost, lower energy use or whatever, with long-term implications that have not really been studied. You're not going to be able to take these fluorescents when they are finished their life and throw them away. You're going to have to dispose of them in a certain way with incredible cost to society.
Don't they, if they break, don't they cost a certain amount of money to clean up?
They do. Not only that,
Pick it up and throw it away, right?
yeah, so as a result, there's more regulation because you have to clean it up in a certain way. You need special vacuums and whatever. You're absolutely right.
I was just going to say, it kind of reminds me of a couple of years ago when they banned trans fats or whatever, like limiting the consumer's options in the marketplace. But it's not the government's responsibility to regulate what the consumer can do for their best interest. Like if I want to eat something that's 10 times worse for my body but tastes better to me, then I should have that ability to do it. You shouldn't regulate my body image or my, I think it was part of BMI because of the social welfare. It's my responsibility to take care of myself. I should have that right to choose what product I want. If I want to use a brighter light bulb that's worse for the environment and not as economical, I should be able to do that. Not have that option regulated by the government just because it's in the near future going to save the environment.
Does anybody feel otherwise?
With the whole, I mean, this healthcare thing, it's like, I guess the idea is with that is that, like, the welfare of one person really affects everyone in that group who's on that healthcare plan. Like, people who are fat and obese and use it, the rest of the people who are skinny and staying in shape, we pay for it. So I think that's a lot of what the government is trying to do.
So shouldn't the government regulate their ability to, like the obese people's ability to get that and not mine? Why do I have to suffer for them not having self-control? Why does everyone have
Then you can look at more discrimination against fat people, pretty much. If they limit what kind of health care fat people have.
But then at the same time, aren't you discriminating against skinny people because they don't have the ability to eat something that tastes better?
Like at a pretty basic level, people don't really want to be told what to do.
That's exactly.
Basic level argument that I kind of want to have, even if I'm not going to make that choice, I want to be able to have the right to make that choice.
You want to eat your Doritos, right?
Well, just to continue with your point, I think people are generally being told what to do from all those commercials. So you're being told that there is a video online called Story of Stuff. Oh, yeah, it's called Story of Stuff. Basically, it's about how we are being influenced by the commercials and made into thinking the mentality that our lives suck until we go shopping.
Yeah.
So this is also telling you what to do in a subtle way that you do not notice.
Yeah, but you got a choice now.
Yeah.
Well, but sometimes you just don't notice that you're being swindled into doing something that isn't working. Well, then you can say, why don't we just regulate the media instead of regulating the actual company?
Well, we've tried that.
I mean, you can go back and forth a million times. Like, that's why this topic is so difficult.
Are we, is the American populace, or are people just too stupid to make their own judgments? Is that what it boils down to? Yeah, who said yes? Huh?
Back to the light bulb thing, like
Yeah.
the regular light bulb, the eco light bulb, like the eco light bulb saves like a lot more money in the long run than the regular light bulb. Like if you pay $2 now as opposed to $8, it saves thousands of dollars in the long run. I don't know why it's like.
And I agree with you. And
People are so dumb about it. Like, think about it. Like, do the math.
Yeah, it makes sense if the product's the exact same, but the light bulbs put off a different amount of light. Like there's an obvious difference between these light bulbs and if you would put a fluorescent light bulb. There's an obvious difference.
if the economics are that obvious, one would think that people should make that judgment, right? It shouldn't be. I mean, I've wrestled with why the government would force something that's so obviously market-driven.
I think a lot of it too is like why government has stepped in is because a lot of these companies, light bulb companies, don't really want to phase out the fluorescent light bulb because they do end up losing money. Because incandescents last longer, people are gonna buy the lights less. So like they wanted to kind of slowly phase in the incandescents rather than fluorescent. So I think it's a matter of like you're being told what to do by the government, but like as people are saying, their advertising is targeted to get people to continue buying this older bad technology because they do make a profit.
I think it also goes to like consumer preference because like the lights, like the quality of light that you're getting from a lot of fluorescent as opposed to a lot of incandescent is different. Like it just looks, there's an obvious difference of that, and it's kind of like newspapers going into like e-readers and stuff. Like people like holding books, they like holding newspapers. Like it's the same type of thing. People like that brighter light. So it's not only like the economics, people are willing to pay more if they can have that quality of light that they enjoy. Like it's easier for them to see.
I mean, I think everyone's making valid points, but one thing that we're forgetting is that a lot of people aren't sitting in the 300 level econ class at Lafayette. A lot of people are watching, Nickelodeon, where they're not doing the intelligent light bulb discussions, they're doing the, SpongeBob SquarePants commercial. So I think for a certain extent, government stepping in and kind of influencing it to move it forward, where we might think like the market might, do it. There are people who are just going to buy what's cheap and buy, the McDonald's and the train bags and things like that. And they're not the ones who are sitting here having this discussion.
Just going back to the comment about media, if you recall, cigarette companies were required to put billions of dollars into an advertising campaign run by the states. And I'm sure you've seen the ads. They're very effective. I mean, they scare the hell out of me. I haven't smoked in decades. How useful do you think that money is being spent? I mean, people are still smoking. And more and more what you see is the government having regulations to preclude people from smoking in certain situations, even in bars and restaurants now. How effective do you think the government can be in communicating through the media?
I think we do a pretty good job, pretty effective with banning smoking in public places, bars, because I personally noticed a difference in when you go to, when they made that rule, a lot of places around here, you don't smell smoke all over the place, a lot of bars, restaurants. So I think the government actually benefited the public by doing that.
I think the government realizes that the people who have been smoking for 5, 10, 15 years, they're addicted to nicotine, so it's going to be hard to get them to stop. But hopefully, their goal is the younger generation to stop.
Yeah.
And that might be the target that they're advertising.
And the they, who's the they in that? Who's the they? Who is, when you say they are trying, or they are doing, they are targeting, is it the government? Is that what you're talking about?
Whoever's funding the advertising.
Uh-huh.
Well, the one issue that I have with government intervening, and we all know that our government loves to intervene in things. That's just what it's what we do. But the issue I have is cigarette smoke has been something that has almost become, I wouldn't call it an epidemic, but it's over time, over decades, has become a true issue. A fluorescent light bulb that could replace those has only been around for a couple of years now. It's not something that has been around. We haven't let the marketplace see where it goes. We've seen that cigarettes, people are going to keep on doing it because it's addictive. So they've stepped in. But that's 30, 40 years worth of research.
This is a very good point. This is a very good point, because Van Heusen, for instance, banned smoking well before anybody else in their factories because it was affecting the insurance rates. The marketplace was telling them, you have to restrict smoking in your... Now, many other companies didn't do that and absorbed the additional cost of their health insurance, but Van Heusen was way ahead of it. And I guess the issue is whether or not the government has a role, or if the marketplace itself can. And of course, Dr. Crane is the expert here in the cost of regulation and its impact. I mean, and it's huge.
Yeah, kind of along the lines of cost, I'm just kind of thinking like, government seems like it has enough on its plate besides having to worry about banning a certain kind of light bulb. That's just kind of how I'm looking at it. We're about to get into our third war, and we're worried about banning a light bulb because it costs more or whatever. That just doesn't seem efficient.
I think this is related. I can't help but jump in a little bit, but there's so many things in a way that might be nice to do, and I would think for Van Heusen also that probably people come to you all the time. Why don't you do X, or why aren't you supporting Y? And it's the slippery slope argument that once you kind of go down this road that you're going to be a good corporate citizen, there's an infinite number of things you could do, and people requests coming to you, and where do you begin to say, yeah, this is appropriate and this isn't? It's a hard line to distinguish.
And I think to that point, the more regulations, the more cost that is put on corporations, the more likely it is that jobs are going to be lost and go elsewhere. At the end of the day, that's where the rubber meets the road, and frankly, that's where, to a large degree, why a lot of corporations have moved their production overseas. If anything, I would hope that we realize that the marketplace can speak for itself. We look at innumerable opportunities to enhance our product, and they're all based on whether or not people are willing to pay additional money. And in some cases, we enhance them. In some cases, we don't. A perfect example was somebody came to me with a formula that put on clothing, textiles, and water just runs right off it. I mean, it's incredible to see the experience. it was going to cost, I think, something like 6% more per garment. And we tested it and determined the marketplace wasn't interested in that. They wanted less expensive product than that. And it failed as a result. But at least the marketplace said it. It wasn't somebody else dictating that you have to do it.
Do you think capitalism is why we don't like get rid of like smoking or light bulbs or like if people spend less money on light bulbs and spend less money in the long run, we're healthier. They won't spend money on anything. So how do you economy work? Or like how I don't know. It's just I feel like capitalism is to blame for why we can't just get rid of it.
Let me make sure I understand. You're saying that capitalism
It's like to blame for why government can't regulate it. It's like, I'll pass for now.
well, unfortunately, you know, we really don't live necessarily in a capitalistic society any longer. There are a lot of influences that are making our form of economy less capitalistic and more socialistic, if you will. And for good or, you know, in some cases, I think it's for the good. But there are a lot of restrictions. I mean, a perfect example, way back when the government dictated that every radio, every car radio, had to have an FM band. You know, in the old days, there were just the AM stations. There was, you know, rock and roll. There was no FM band, effectively. Nobody listened to it. The government dictated that every car had to have an FM band. As a result, FM sprouted up, and of course, the fidelity of the FM signal is a lot better than the AM signal. That's why all your music is primarily on FM these days. It wouldn't have happened without that, without the government, because nobody wanted to invest in a product that nobody would buy.
I've never heard that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's how it happened. When I started at ABC, the first thing they did was take me back down to WABC Radio, the AM station in New York, and they said to me, "We pay for ourselves Monday morning, and after that, everything is profit." Today, you know, it's tough to make money in the AM radio business.
I have a question kind of about social responsibility and advertising and marketing, like brand research. Do you guys feel pressure about body image and things like that with your models or your TV advertisements? Kind of, I mean, I guess like the beautiful, the skinny, that kind of stuff. Is there?
Well, I actually was Tuesday at a presentation of Calvin Klein, and I mean, it was exactly as you say. I mean, every model was stick thin, and then I went. You know, I guess it was actually it wasn't this week. I think it was last week. I saw the Tommy Hilfiger. I don't know if anybody's seen the Hilfigers ad. You know, a wide variety of these faux club people, all sorts of people. Although there were no football players in that group, I'll tell you that. But there is certainly a concern with overemphasizing form and figure. But at the end of the day, pick up any fashion magazine, it's tough to avoid it.
Do you feel like you're getting, maybe on that pressure, I mean, the groups are springing up in a way, these advocacy groups, and pressuring you or other companies to push you into these things. I mean, are you, the same kind of almost pressure groups that would be pressuring government now and are coming to you?
Well, you know, this course is going to be talking about industries like energy and chemicals and whatever. the corporate social responsibility area is like a mini industry. There's been sprouting up all sorts of people who are influencers of influencers. And I actually attend the major conference in New York. It used to be, 50 people. Today it's a ballroom filled with people, filled with corporate executives from every corner of virtually the world. It has become an important element of anybody's program, and the number of influencers is astronomical, and they all have their issues. So what else can I tell you about social responsibility or media or anything else? Any questions?
I actually have a question that goes off of the question about the stick skinny model. And do you think it would be possible, like I'm super skinny and I read these magazines and I'm not like freaked out that I have this diet, but there are people who do. And do you think if like your company or any of the like IZOD, any of those, if they put a size 6 model, do you think you could start a trend, or do you think there's really no reason to try and move away from the size 0 and double 0?
Well, I'll say this. Lane Bryant is doing exceptionally well.
Yeah.
A friend of mine actually started a full-figure retail chain, and he's doing okay. The problem is that the brands, our brands, don't really cater to, the large sizes. I guess if there was, if there was more of a market, I'm sure we would be there. But it's sort of anathema to the image of a Calvin Klein, or even a Tommy, or IZOD, which is a lifestyle brand. It's tough to, believe me, I'm pushing the boundaries of the IZOD store at this point.
I wonder, we haven't really had a chance to talk too much about, and this fits right in, because I like the way you're framing this as a fiduciary, your responsibility, fiduciary responsibility as a corporate board member. What if you'd say a little more about that, in the sense the risk involved in being a board member, what sort of liability you face, and how that's changed in the wake of, I guess, the last 5 years.
Yeah, and corporate social responsibility, our committee is identical to the audit committee. I chair the audit committee. I sit on the corporate social responsibility committee. The audit committee is responsible for overseeing how the financial statements are created and published and are presented to the investment community. There's a very extremely rigorous approach to making sure that the statements are accurate and fully reflective of the business. Similarly, that same kind of rigorous approach is now being applied to corporate social responsibility because our reputation is of such importance. The audit committee also focuses on risk, enterprise risk management. It's ERM, it's called. And we identify a whole list of potential risks to the company. We identify the top 10. We try to mitigate to the extent that we possibly can and address those potential problems. And similarly, that's effectively what the Corporate Social Responsibility Committee is. It addresses and tries to be proactive and make sure that our risk to the enterprise is limited. It's nice to sit on a board, but a board has certain responsibilities, and if those responsibilities are not fulfilled, there is certainly liability. But I don't think that's really the issue as much as making sure that the company's reputation is intact.
In comparing it to an auditing sector, do you ever see the corporate social responsibility becoming an outsourced product? Your auditors are from, an accounting firm, but they're in-house all year round. They're your guys. They're working on your financials. Do you ever see that becoming an outsourced product, because then you have an outside source looking in and seeing where you need to change? Because you're working for the company, you have an agenda, like as you said, as a board of directors, you have an agenda to make a profit. So is there ever going to be a point where you're going to want someone from the outside coming in and looking and saying, this is what you need to be doing, versus you're having kind of I'm not saying you have a clouded view, but you can when you're working for the company trying to make a profit, but at the same time, you want to be socially responsible.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, by the way. There are industry groups and consultants that we use sort of as an overview. There's one, our consultant is called BSR. It's actually the company that puts together this huge conference in New York. And they are very effective and very fair and open-minded about how we address things. But on the specifics, when we deal with the workplace or when we deal with the environment, we do have specific people that we turn to help us. And industry, actually there are industry groups now that include Walmart and Van Heusen and Nike and others who work together to make sure that the factories are vetted properly and that licensees are behaving properly. But we can't do it ourselves. It's just too big a job. So we do have to rely on others. But and more we see these groups sprouting up. When I approached Mark, I don't know what our timing is, but when I first approached Mark, I was greatly concerned with the perception that students might have about corporate life and the mercenary way that corporations were being portrayed. Everything was a corporation's fault. The banks were failing. The insurance companies were failing. The auto companies were a problem. Energy problems. Corporations, they were being demonized. So one of the things I thought we should make sure that our students understand is that corporations do a lot of good. And the more that we employ and work together, the world will be a better place as a result. And so that's really the effective message of corporate social responsibility.
And for your support of Lafayette.
Well, thank you.